Welcome to the Liberty Collaborative, where the past meets the present in the fight for freedom. We uncover the roots of liberty, spotlight the people who shaped it, and explore what it takes to preserve it today. If you're ready to think deeper, stand stronger, and act with purpose, you're in the right place. Let's reclaim what matters most.
And good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday to you. It's October 16th, 2025 on this glorious Thursday morning. Blue skies, cool breeze here in Connecticut. And we are going to be talking about, are we seeking justice or revenge? The fight over retribution or versus accountability. And with me today, I have Chris Coyle from Wins Lab, Mike Hancock, Undercurrent, Substack, and hopefully at some point today, he is traveling. Kay Carl will be joining us. Good morning and welcome, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys. What exciting time. You know, Kate Carl's on his way back.
You guys.
Sorry? Aaron, can you hear us?
What is going on here? Oh,
all right. Houston.
There we go. I had the wrong slider down on my my soundboard.
Michael, I'm just glad Aaron's flying this plane because I would have had it augured in long ago.
Oh, yes. Him better than me.
So, guys, exciting time. Kate Carl's flying back from a speaking engagement and just tremendous excitement about his book, comparing Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx. Such good timing. But holy cow, Michael and Aaron, you know, you never thought you'd see it. You've got James Comey, who's been indicted by a grand jury, right? So a grand jury in a very liberal area thought there were enough actual charges to indict him. And then you had Latifah, if I'm pronouncing it right, Attorney General in New York, indicted in Virginia, again, a liberal area, on essentially mortgage fraud.
Yep.
And the number of people out there, including on the free press, what you'd think of people that were sort of in the middle, there's this huge sort of outcry. Well, this is retribution. And so what a perfect time to really talk about what's the difference between the two.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, this is very interesting in that there's this whole balance between getting elected and being in a position like Trump is to have a DOJ that actually holds people accountable for the laws that they may have broken, and then to have the juxtaposition of those people that, let's say, if they actually did break those laws, all they have to do is shout retribution to attempt to get away with what it is that they've done.
And even Comey's defense, Aaron, from what I saw, the lawyers are going after, and it's always important for a lawyer's client not to make public statements, but saying, well, Trump's statement to Bondi about go get him shows it's targeting. What was the other thing? It's unfair.
Right.
But I don't think he has any defense that says I didn't do it.
No, I don't think so either. And we have to remember historically, when we look at like George Washington, for example, he saw justice not as vengeance, I would say, but as more stability. I think he kind of referred to like the glue that keeps liberty from being chaotic or collapsing in on itself. And that's something we have to understand. Just because somebody says, oh, he's coming after him for retribution, that's not necessarily it. There were laws broken. People need to be held accountable for.
George Washington had people shot, firing squads in the military.
Yes.
Right in front of everybody.
Yeah.
He was really clear.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I think about here is that the call for that this is retribution, and which subtly says that, well, no, this shouldn't be something that's being done. But what about the truth? The question is, what is the truth? And I think the system and the process should play out in the way of determining what the truth is. But it seems to me the cry of retribution is something that is really meant to halt people from pursuing.
Yeah, a generalization, a label that distracts people. Let's unpack this, Aaron and Michael, for a minute. First of all, we've talked on this show before about one of the debate techniques of false equivalency or conflation. So let's just break this down for a minute. All right. There are people writing and saying it's retribution because, Latifah James went after Trump for basically loan problems, lying on loans. And now Trump's going after her for lying on loans. They're sort of the same thing. Well, no, they're not.
Nope.
So let's just sort of differentiate them. In Trump's case, you had a state attorney general run on the platform, almost sole platform, that she was going to go get Donald Trump.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, from what I recall, they conflated somehow federal offenses into state offenses. Remember, they were able to sort of do a trick and recover the statute of limitations. So all sorts of tricks. But the fundamental issue at hand in Trump's case was that he went to a bank, had all his assets that include a lot of real estate, said, we think they're worth this. And the bank said, okay, you're allowed to tell us what you think they're worth. We're going to go figure out what we think they're worth and we'll give you a loan. They did, paid them all back. And the claim, correct me if I'm not mistaken, was that he lied or he misrepresented what his real estate was worth to get those loans.
Correct.
Right.
Right. And you're right, Chris. That's how it works. You could tell, like, if I wanted to refi my house and pull out cash to build a barn that I would love to have in my backyard, I could tell the bank all day long my house is worth $1 million. They're going to send out a third party to come out and appraise what that value is, and then say, okay, Mr. Bowman, we see your house is worth $100,000 because it's dilapidated because you haven't done deferred maintenance and everything like that. So we'll give you a loan of $5. That was kind of like their argument. Oh, well, you lied about it. No bank is just going to take somebody's word on what their assets are.
Well, and it was good faith, right? There was no misrepresentation. There was no lying. Now let's take the Attorney General of New York, who files for a mortgage, right, and seeks by lying about the truth of the matter of who was in the house, seeking a preferred interest rate. Well, why does that matter? Because the way you keep the system solvent is people have to tell the truth. And the truth is, if it's a family occupied dwelling, there's less risk, there's more stability. Yes. There are lots of insurance adjusters and mortgage adjusters who figure out over time that people are more likely to repay the loan. If it's a rental property, then they have the right to say, a little more risky, you got to pay us a little more. In the case of Letitia James, she lied.
Yep.
She did. Point blank lied. So to pretend these two cases, and by the way, it says in the stuff I think she signed that you are certifying you're not lying. Right. And you understand if you do lie, there's consequences. In Trump's case, all lawyers around, he said, this is what we think they're worth. He could go to another bank who thinks they're worth more or less. And the bank wanted to lend him money again. Do you think the mortgage company is going to want to lend Miss Letitia James? Is that her last name? Sorry.
Yep. James. Yep.
I'm not sure she's going to be able to go in the front door and line up for another mortgage by lying. So straight off, they're not equivalent. And creating that kind of false equivalent is really a disservice to people because it's the stepping stone to then saying, well, this is retribution when it's not.
Well, Chris, what do you think about ultimately how this plays out, ultimately impacts how people view the government and how it operates?
Well, we've seen, right, Aaron, for a long time now, the appearance of a two-tier justice system.
Yes.
Where Comey, who was FBI, could say, I don't feel like going after Hillary Clinton. They literally, Merrick Garland, deciding to either enforce or not enforce laws. And so people have really, I think, guys, concluded there's a two-tier justice system. If anyone listening to the show gets pulled over for speeding, you go to traffic court.
Yes.
If you violate laws, if you trespass, if you shoplift, you're arrested. But then these guys just do a big crime and everyone looks the other way. And so finally to say a signal that we're going to hold everyone accountable. Remember, you're accountable to who? The people. And how are you accountable? To a law that says you can't lie to Congress.
Right.
And everyone's got to realize lying to the FISA court, all the other stuff, leaking information, he's kind of gotten away with. The statute of limitations is run. But these particular transgressions, legal violations, they haven't run. They can get him. So, Michael, my thought is, Aaron, this is important to realize that just because you're high up there and can lie and then get a talking gig on CNN doesn't make you above the law.
No, you're 100% right. And going back to the mortgage stuff, people just kind of think, oh, it's no big deal. It is a big deal, like you said, because there is risk involved when you have a rental. When I purchased my home using a VA loan, I can't purchase a rental property with a VA loan. I have to say that and swear to that I'm staying in that property. That's going to be my main residence. And what she did is she said, yes, I'm going to live in Virginia, right? That's where it was. And there's people renting the house. I saw the news clip. The people walked up and said, do you even know who this lady is? They're like, oh, get off our property, private property. You know, she swore on documents that are signed by her, the bank. There's a notary that says, yes, you're testifying that this is going to be your home, your residence. And for anybody that's ever bought a house, you have like a small rainforest of paperwork that you have to sign. And for them just to say, oh, it's no big deal, it's retribution, he's just coming after. He never, Trump never ran on a platform saying, I'm going to go get Letitia James. No. That was her platform. And it makes me think of John Adams when he said, we're a government of laws, not of men.
Yeah, we're going to restore the law.
Exactly.
We've talked about that, and we all share the common view that we view personality politics as a distraction. We think the political parties can lead to divisiveness. We're about shared values and principles. And you and I, Aaron, certainly, and Michael, we've talked about that many people may have likely voted for Trump, even though they don't like the guy's personality. I mean, he's a New York real estate guy. Yeah. Now, my sense is that a lot of them warmed up to him and get that he cares. But what they love, I think, you guys, is his love of our system. And yes, is he aggressive and trying to make the most of it? Sure he is. He's admitted in books, years ago about taking loans, and, he's an aggressive businessman, but he believes in the rule of law. And that's what he's celebrating, not this personal stuff. But here's a question I got for you guys. The law talks a lot about state of mind, right? And relative weight of the weight of a transgression. Obviously, if it's capital one murder, you're getting arrested, so forth. If it's a mistake, you were parked in a no parking zone and you say, look, I made a mistake. I was rushing my kid to the hospital. But look about this for a second. Wouldn't we want to hold people like James Comey and Letitia James to the highest standard possible? Because, Aaron, back to your point, if it's a first-time homeowner couple that makes a mistake or actually falsifies something because they want to rent it to their old mother and they're living next door, people might say, you screwed up, you lied, but the facts and circumstances based on who you are. But when you're the Attorney General of New York buying a house in Virginia, I'm sorry, but the weight of responsibility of her to abide by the law, or James Comey, I would suggest, is held to a very high standard that they should be clear. The next FBI agent and the one after him, director, right, are held to that standard way up here. We're going to hold you and everyone else under you to that standard.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen happen over many years is that the public's trust has been eroded because they've seen time after time politicians, people in high places, simply get away with crimes. I was speaking to my daughter just before our podcast, and she basically accused all of those government people, all of those people in leadership, they are doing bad things and getting away with it. Now, that's not true. That's from my perspective, a great exaggeration, but that's ultimately what ends up happening and really begins to be embraced by people that don't know how our government works, aren't actually actively participating in holding people accountable and the like.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michael.
Aaron and Michael, I asked Kay Carl about the historical perspective here, because we know on the Liberty Collaborative, we try when applicable and appropriate, to bring in history. And one of the things I asked Kay Carl is, how do we deal with what happened on 1865 when General Lee surrendered and the South surrendered? And he pointed out that Frederick Douglass wanted Lee charged with treason. And there were people who wanted trials. You remember from history, I mean, Lincoln took a lot of heat. And so you look at the historical context on that and say, all right, well, we had a country to rebuild, and putting Lee on trial would likely inflame all the people in the South that had fought and died for him, and you would make him a martyr. And one of the things I think they were worried about is an ongoing civil war that occurred. How many years of the French Revolution, all these revolutions in Europe go on because there was constant cycles of retribution. So it's an interesting perspective. They didn't charge Lee with treason, but they extracted, because they asked Kay Carl, was there any accountability for the South? He goes, well, yeah, there was a lot of stuff that the South had to do and submit to, and they had federal troops down there. So it's an interesting question. We look historically, the biggest event on in our country being the Civil War, that there was no retribution. I mean, there might have been locally, but on a federal, national level, but there was accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I think we've really gotten away from, is the accountability over the last several years with the previous administration. Things were being run amok, and it takes time to clean that up and to finally have, bring back that law and order, as they say. It's nice, and it's sad that it gets spun to where it's more about retribution and not about people actually breaking the law and being held accountable, that personal responsibility that Douglass talked about, and saying, hey, listen, you did this wrong. You lied on this document. You signed it. You don't live in Virginia. You're in New York. So guess what? Now you have to pay the piper. And it's amazing how people get upset about that when we're just asking people to be responsible for their actions.
Yeah. The thing, I look at it, I started hearing the left basically make this proclamation that if Donald Trump was elected, there would be retribution to pay, and that he was going to go out and do that. And I'm doing that while I think that's probably over the last couple of years. Now, in 2017, January of 2017, I think is actually when I was watching a Mark Levin show, and he basically presented all of what had happened with the FISA court and all that sort of stuff. So it came out many years ago, if you will, but somehow just now in Trump's second time holding office, the light is really being shined on it. And so I think that we have to hold these people accountable for what it is that what they've done. And if we don't do that, it basically just sort of eats away at the integrity of our overall system. And I think at this particular point in time, we're in big need of a heavy dose of integrity happening. The media hasn't helped in that situation at all, right? But I think that there's no choice that I think Trump and his administration has but to go after and prosecute people that have actually broken the law. Otherwise, what you end up doing is you're encouraging them to continue to do the same sort of thing.
Right. Yep, 100%.
So how would you guys answer? Let's turn this around. Several of the Supreme Court dissenting justices, when the birthright citizenship district court injunctions were dismissed, rejected by the Supreme Court about 6 months ago. Remember that? And they said, no district courts. We can't have a system where any district court, and we know they're usually in certain states, are telling the federal government, you got to stop. And the Supreme Court said, no, they don't. But they did not rule on the underlying law about birthright citizenship. Now, why do I bring that up? Well, the justices who dissented said President Trump is breaking the law. He is violating the law. Now, what do we mean when we say law? There is statutory criminal law that says you can't do these things, right? There is civil law. There are concepts of responsible behavior, negligence. You got to follow a contract. And there's obviously constitutional law where you are afforded certain rights under the Constitution. I think what the justices who dissented said about the substantive part of the birthright citizenship is Trump's not following the law. And so people are clear. They're technically not incorrect, but here's how it breaks down. First of all, there's no criminal law that says you have the right to come here, have a kid, and go home, and suddenly the kid's a citizen. There's no civil law that says you have that right. They're referring to a particular set of Supreme Court cases that say the intent of these sections were to give people the right to citizenship. And remember, guys, there was a comma in it that said, comma, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
Correct.
So the debate has been that just like the Dred Scott decision, the eugenics decision years later, where they said it was okay to sterilize demented people, there have been a lot of bad Supreme Court holdings that were later overturned. So when people say Trump's not following the law, technically they're correct. But what they're referring to is that Trump's actions appear to violate the most recent, if you will, precedent of the Supreme Court in applying the meaning, in this case, of the birthright citizenship. So the point, I hope it's not too convoluted, but they're different.
Yeah.
He's following what he believes is the constitutional law.
Yeah. And I think if you take a look at the Constitution and what the 14th Amendment says about this, and what the authors of that clause about birthrights, they made it perfectly clear that they weren't talking about people that entered the country illegally, right?
Touch and go citizens.
Yeah. And also, I think, as I looked through some of the case law, there's one that they point to, I forget the name, but it actually didn't, the birthright was given to a person whose parents were in the country legally. He was outside of the country. He came back. There was a contest. It was contested as to whether he was a citizen or not, and he was actually found to be a citizen because his parents were here legally. So there's no case law that I know of where anybody that came into the country illegal and had a child, that child is considered to be a citizen. So,
Michael, the reason I think it's so important for our listeners is here we bring up retribution and accountability. And I hear smart people say, Aaron, well, Trump's doing it too. Everyone's doing it. I go, no, wait. When he puts troops in LA or in Portland or in Chicago, he points to where he has the legal right to protect federal troops, to keep order. It's clear there is disorder. They're burning buildings down. And so people say, well, Chicago or Illinois went to district court and they've held it. That doesn't mean Trump is violating the law. He is very clear about what he believes the law provides him. As we talked earlier, that's how our constitutional system has to work.
Yep.
Right. But when you say, well, he's breaking the law too. No, it's a little different when James Comey leaks, lies to Congress, lies to FISA courts, does all these things that you're not allowed to do. That's different.
Right. 100%. And that's something that I think a lot of people miss. They miss that because you have one side basically telling people what they want to hear, saying, oh yeah, Trump's a criminal. He's doing this wrong. He can't put troops into LA or Louisiana or wherever the Chicago. But like you said, he goes, I'm putting troops here because the local government's not protecting its citizens. That's the job of the government, is to protect its citizens. We have federal assets in there. We're putting in our troops. Now, the troops aren't doing DUI stops. They're not doing no-knock warrant searches and raids in houses. They're there to protect the assets and to bring law and order. They're not doing DUI stops and all that stuff because they're not trained in that. Now, certain parts of the military, like when I was in security forces, we were trained to do certain things because we had a law enforcement mission, but that still didn't blend with a civil law enforcement.
Right.
And that's where people are getting this, oh, well, they can't be there. Yeah, they can be there. They can be there to protect assets. And if there's ICE agents on the ground trying to do their job and they're being shot at, they're being stuff thrown at them. You have groups online talking about throwing oil on their windshield so they can't see and using nails and rubber hoses like a garden hose to make stop sticks. Well, then you need to bring in the federal government to protect those agents. And I don't understand why in this day and age seems to be such a hard concept to understand about law and order. We're a country built on laws, and we need to enforce those laws. It just, it really kind of is really makes you think.
It really, guys, it's such an important topic because when you think about the power of the badge, the power, the justice system and the rights given to people with a badge, and you think about it, one of the things that we know is we want people that are reasonable and prudent and follow it. But when people, for example, a judge says, I know we're going to charge you $1 billion fine. What was the guy in New York? Trump was supposedly had to pay $1 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond belief. And finally, the Supreme Court said no, or New York State Supreme Court, that is, I think, said no. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
So retribution, it certainly looks like it, right? Or as Justice Gorsuch wrote in a book called Overruled, a great book, the process of federal prosecutors overcharging people. So look at all the charges that Trump had to fight in Georgia, Smith, documents in Florida. I mean, they just, not only did they have individual attacks on him, but collectively, which I think evidence could come out they were coordinating, was to just run them out. So you say, well, isn't that retribution?
Right. Didn't have that guy come from one, who was the attorney? They brought him to like the civil stuff in the state side. Wasn't he like a federal prosecutor? And they bumped him down. I'm like, really? Like, if that's not retribution, I don't know what is. It's you're right. They were trying to stack the deck against them.
Don't these people realize that the same overreach, the same violations of laws can cut both ways? And so, I haven't seen an impeachment effort where you hide evidence, except one party doing it. None of it was successful. It was show. So I just think as we summarize here, what people got to do is realize that the law is supposed to be blind, standard, treats everyone the same. And if you elect someone to be attorney general, a pretty powerful position, or appoint someone to run the FBI, I think everyone agrees those guys got to abide by a tough standard of discipline, of authority, of responsibility and accountability. And for those folks, you cannot look the other way. The signal it would send is terrible.
Absolutely. Chris, when you were talking about that, it piqued one thing in my mind, which is for those people who actually are locked into specific media sources that are actually only telling them one side of the story, well, they don't know that there's another part of the story, that the very people that are crying retribution and saying that Trump is coming after them have actually all along been doing exactly the same thing to Trump. And in the case that what they're doing is actually, it is very clearly retribution. What Trump is doing is just, from my perspective, simply making people being held accountable for the bad things that they've done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, good show, guys. I'm sorry we missed K. Carl, but an interesting topic that will continue to unfold. The context around this and the true content that many people don't hear on the media is that these things aren't equivalent. They are different. And holding people accountable when they're given incredible authority. Both these, James Comey and Letitia James, are given incredible authority and taxpayer money to investigate people. Look what they've done with people like General Flynn, costing him millions of dollars to defend himself, and now they're subject to his lawsuits for going after him. But this is a powerful weapon, these FBI and Attorney General. And I think, guys, they should be held to the highest standard. You can't abuse that power.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. For sure. They should be. And what was it? Madison that said something. I'm trying to think of now. It's something about if men were angels, no government would be necessary. I think that's what he said in one of Meadows' papers. And he's just reminding us that human nature, I guess you could say, requires accountability and justice. Like you said, Chris, should be blind. And I would even go further in saying it should restrain wrongdoers and those in power alike. So whether you're in power and you're abusing it, justice should be there to correct that.
Yeah. And I think that the key thing is going to be, I think, technology today, the media, and how it works makes that more difficult, but even the more important.
Yeah.
Wow. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, guys.
Yes, very good show today. Thank you for those that have been watching online. We are here every Thursday at roughly 10:30 a.m. as long as there's no technical difficulties or anything like that. But thank you, everybody, for listening and watching, and we will see you next Thursday on Liberty Collaborative.
All right.
Thanks for joining us on the Liberty Collaborative. If today's episode lit a fire or gave you clarity, share it. Be part of the movement. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stand firm, stay free.